It's time for Herd Mentality, the weekly episode where you control the discussion today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by Bird Dogs. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL or enter promo code LockedOnNFL for a water bottle free with any order. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off, we promise you. Well, folks, it's time for Herd Mentality. You know the drill. You submit some great questions, comments, takes, whatever you have regarding the Bills, and I respond to them here on the podcast. So we've got some of that to get to. And then I want to close out our discussion today by telling you what you can expect from me during the season. I've made some tweaks to our normal programming. If you've been listening to this podcast for a number of years, you know how we attack a game week during the season, and I've added some stuff. And there's some new opportunities to catch my content here. So I'll finish off with that. But first, let's dive into some outstanding herd mentality items. First one today comes from Mike. Mike says, do you think Sean McDermott's defense will be more high risk, high reward than Leslie Frazier's? And if so, are you okay with that given we have a high-powered offense? Yeah, this is one of the biggest storylines for me for the Buffalo Bills in 2023 is how does this defense evolve with Sean McDermott as the defensive coordinator replacing Leslie Frazier? I've been extremely complimentary of Leslie Frazier and the tenure that he had in Buffalo. But after the playoff loss to the Bengals, one of my big takeaways was that Leslie Frazier had run his course in Buffalo, and it was time for a change there. And Sean McDermott has taken it upon himself to be the defensive coordinator. He could have promoted a number of internal candidates, whether that's John Butler or Bobby Babich or Eric Washington, Al Holcomb. He could have hired somebody from outside, but instead he took full ownership, or he's taking full ownership in the defense, and it's his. And with that, I think there will be some changes. One thing that I keep going back to with this conversation is you have to remember where Sean McDermott came up through, right? Who were his coaching influences? And he was the understudy of Jim Johnson in the early 2000s. Jim Johnson, defensive coordinator for the Eagles, known for being very aggressive with blitzing, being very in-your-face type defense. And I think you're going to see a lot of that from this defense under Sean McDermott. It's going to have a different look and feel. And I can appreciate philosophically what Leslie Frazier's scheme was designed to do, which was, hey, you're not going to hit big plays on us. And if you're going to score, you're going to have to execute play after play after play. You're going to have to stack good plays on top of each other to get down the field and score on us. Now, we're going to give you free access. We're going to have some soft alignments. We're going to play zone. We're going to give you soft alignments. And if you can take advantage of it and stay patient and execute enough and hit throws outside the numbers, you're going to be able to move the ball. Where I think Sean McDermott is going to be more aggressive in every imaginable way, whether that's by alignment, with DBs playing tighter to the line of scrimmage, with more exotic fronts, with simulated pressures, with more blitzing, by sending defensive backs. I think that's all going to be a staple of what this defense looks like under Sean McDermott. And one of the interesting contrasts that I've observed throughout being at training camp for a week and then watching the preseason is how different the defense looked in camp and preseason games. The Bills' defense during the preseason was super vanilla. I remember I got some questions from people like, hey, what's going on with Leonard Floyd? He's been quiet. They're not really blitzing. Where is all this? Well, I think that's a pretty good indicator that the defense is going to look a lot different than it did in preseason, and that they showed something very vanilla on purpose during preseason. The Bills, compared to the rest of the NFL during preseason, below preseason league averages for blitzes, for stunts, and for simulated pressures. In fact, they ran zero simulated pressures throughout the preseason. They're holding stuff. They've got some things up their sleeve for the regular season. And I go back to the conversation that I had with Alex Brasky last week on this podcast. We talked about Taylor Rapp, and he got into the role there and how he's going to be featured and, playing some alongside Matt Milano and 3 safety sets and all that type of stuff. Like, it's going to have a different look and feel. And I give Sean McDermott a lot of credit for taking complete ownership in it. And it's on him now. The reason he got this job was his defensive prowess in Carolina. Let's see you evolve this thing in Buffalo, and let's not watch this Bills defense get wrecked in the playoffs once again. Next one here comes from Paul. Paul says, first, thank you for addressing the negativity about the Bills in your last podcast. Last year in the pregame versus the Rams, when virtually every pundit picked the Bills to win the Super Bowl, I knew we were doomed. I love that the Bills are being faded this year. Second, do you think Shane Buechele helps in any way with the scouting of the Chiefs when we play them? I know players move around all the time, but I wonder if someone who played a pivotal role for our nemesis scout team moves the needle. Appreciate that, Paul. And the first part of Paul's comment there was reflecting on what I talked about last week with some of the anxiety that exists for the fan base and how that's leading to a lot of emphasis on negatives, and people are really focusing in on, well, what could get in the way of the Bills maximizing their opportunity to win the Super Bowl with the talent they have and Josh Allen's physical prime. And I think because of that, it's really made people lean into some of the negatives. And there certainly are negatives. There's things to be concerned about. But I think it's heightened because of some anxiety that exists that, hey, maybe this won't happen. Maybe the Bills won't maximize this opportunity. And so everything is elevated. So I offered a lot more analysis than that last week, so you can go back and listen to it. But the second part of what Paul's getting into is Shane Buechele, the Bills' new practice squad quarterback, QB3, coming over from the Chiefs, who was there for a couple of seasons. And what type of benefit can that be for the Bills, especially when they play the Chiefs? Now, as I've stated, the primary job of Shane Buechele is to run the scout team offense. He wants to give the Bills defense, the starting defense, good looks. And so this week, Shane Buechele gets to be Aaron Rodgers. And next week, the Bills play the Raiders. He gets to be Jimmy Garoppolo. And then they play the Commanders, so he gets to be Sam Howell. His job every week is to run the Bills' opponent's offense for the defense, for the Bills' defense, as part of the scout team offense. And him having been in that Chiefs system for a couple of years is going to be a major benefit for the Bills when they game plan against the Chiefs. Having insight into Kansas City can only help. Now, Shane Buechele's not Patrick Mahomes, but for that week, he's got to be Patrick Mahomes, and he spent a couple of years around the guy. And so not only can he help with that, but, the Bills can ask Shane Buechele questions. What did you think of us? How did you want to attack this? Or how did you perceive this weakness or strength on the Bills? And what was the game plans like? He has that intel. And so it can only be helpful. Now, to Paul's point here within the question, you said, look, teams bounce around, change teams all the time. Like, that happens. And, at the end of the day, these guys aren't on the field. They're not executing, all the time. But there is that familiarity that he has with Kansas City that should be able to help the Bills with the game planning and their opportunities against Kansas City. Next one here comes from Nick. Nick says, as we get on the verge of another Bills season, I wonder if you could comment on whether you think the past 3 years of Bills football have been a success. I have this debate with my friends all the time about how much the journey matters versus only caring about the end result. After suffering through the playoff drought, I have appreciated the past 3 years where the Bills were legitimate Super Bowl contenders. But they say I'm just accepting mediocrity because they haven't met the ultimate goal of a Super Bowl. How anyone could feel so unappreciative of success after suffering as Bills fans is beyond me. But wondering what your take is on appreciating the journey to get here versus having a single sole definition of success It comes down to getting a ring. You have a lot to say about this. And first of all, accepting mediocrity. We're not talking about a 9-8 football team or an 8-9 football team or a 7-10 football team. That's mediocrity. Nobody's accepting that. The Bills have been one of the most successful football teams over the last 3 years in the entire NFL. It's not debatable. No, they have not won the Super Bowl. No, they have not won the AFC Championship game. But when you're talking about success for an NFL football team, I don't believe it's ever Super Bowl or bust. I've said that a million times on this podcast. I'll maintain saying that. It's never Super Bowl or bust. The last 3 years, the Bills have had the second most wins in the NFL. They've won 3 consecutive AFC East division titles. They're one of only 2 teams in the entire NFL to win at least one playoff game in each of the last 3 seasons. Now, there's an emptiness that I feel, and I'm sure a lot of us feel, because all of that hasn't resulted in a Super Bowl appearance. But get out of here with this idea that we're accepting mediocrity. To me, success in the NFL cannot be measured in a binary way. Success can't be, well, did they win the Super Bowl? If the answer is yes, it was successful. If the answer is no, then it wasn't. Because only one team wins the Super Bowl. So only one team every year out of 32 has a successful season? You can miss me with that ideology. The last 3 years have been very successful, but at the same time, there has been meat left on the bone. You can acknowledge both things. You can say, hey, the Bills have been clearly one of the best teams in the NFL over the last 3 years. They have the record to prove it, the playoff wins to prove it. Their defense, their offense ranks in the top 3 every single year. They've had the capacity to go do it all. Circumstances have gotten in the way. Some of that, self-inflicted. We've talked about it. But that's not mediocrity. That's dominance in a lot of ways. Unfortunately, it hasn't gone their way to win it all, right? And yeah, I feel an emptiness about that, and I want it to happen. But in a single elimination playoff tournament with a weird-shaped football, can't be Super Bowl or bust. Can't be one team out of 32 every year that wins the Super Bowl. That's the only team that was successful. I don't buy that at all. Not even a little bit. All right, let me tell you about something I do buy, and that's Bird Dogs. This is an awesome brand, folks. You got to check them out. They have the best shorts. They have the best joggers out there, and that's pretty much all I wear. I don't wear jeans. I don't wear khakis, dress pants. You can miss me with that. I'm only wearing shorts and joggers, and Bird Dogs, they're my go-to brand. They make you look good. They have these stretch khaki shorts. They're designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg. They give you that truly sculpted look. You know, everybody raves about Lululemons. Well, Bird Dogs shorts do the exact same thing, but they actually fit way better, and they fit way better than pretty much every pair of short ever, right? These regular shorts, they're made of stiff, restricting cotton. Nope, that's not the case with Bird Dogs. They fixed the issue by inventing cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki, but stretches so that you get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. They have the anti-stink sweat-wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long, and they're so versatile. I mean, Bird Dogs are functional for any occasion. You can wear them out on the golf course, date night, you're hanging out by the pool, you're doing work in the yard, chilling at the house, watching football. They fit for any occasion. Like, you could put them on with a polo, you look great. You can put them on with a t-shirt and chill around the house. They are awesome, and they're super comfortable. So check them out. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL or enter promo code LockedOnNFL at checkout for a free Bird Dogs water bottle with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL for a free water bottle at checkout. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you. All right, folks, the next one today comes from Chris. Chris says, do you think it's possible, and if so, the likelihood that the Bills were targeting a linebacker in the second round of the draft, and then Osiris Torrence fell to them? Then we saw a run on linebackers in the third round. It's a good question, Chris, and it was a bad year for linebackers. If you remember all of our pre-draft conversations, I didn't have a lot of great things to say about the off-ball linebackers. I was really in on Jack Campbell. I was lukewarm on Drew Sanders. And then I said, really, I don't know if there's guys that really appeal to me as starting Mike linebackers. And I think that helped a guy like Jack Campbell get picked 18th overall. I mean, Jack Campbell, a top 20 pick. Some people told me I was crazy for thinking that he would be a good pick for the Bills at 27. The guy goes in the top 20. But it was a light year for linebackers. And I really think that the Bills wanted to solidify the guard position. And maybe they didn't anticipate Torrence being there, and maybe they would have picked a linebacker in the second round. But I think once Torrence was there, it made it a pretty easy decision because, as I've stated, if you want to put a black eye on Brandon Beane's resume as the Bills GM, you could talk about the second round. Okay, that's fine. But at the end of the day, it's been the guard position. There's been zero stability at guard. None. The Bills haven't had the same primary starter year over year at left guard or right guard since 2016 and 2017 when it was Richie Incognito and John Miller. Every year it's different players. And setting that depth of the pocket and allowing Mitch Morse to have some continuity with what's going on next to him, it hadn't happened. It's been different guards. I mean, not just year to year, but sometimes within the season, you're starting 3-4 different guys with regularity. And so I think they wanted to get that stabilized. And hopefully with giving Connor McGovern the contract that they did and picking Osiris Torrence in the second round does that. And it gives you a couple of starters that for the next 3-4 years, you can roll with those guys and feel good about it. Now, the Bills did come back and pick Dorian Williams, a linebacker, in the third round. But I think what we have to come to terms with the Bills is that they made a concession at linebacker. They did. They didn't want to meet Tremaine Edmonds' salary, and they didn't want to meet anybody's salary. And maybe that's a big miscalculation, and it's a fatal flaw, and it'll be a problem all year. I'm very concerned about it. But there's a lot of you out there that said defense, schmefense, and said go all in on offense and figure it out on defense. Well, they did. They did that. The biggest contract they gave out in the offseason, Connor McGovern, a guard. Deontay Hardy, Trent Sherfield, Damian Harris, Latavius Murray. One of only 3 teams in the NFL to use their first 2 picks in the draft on offensive players. They did it. They did the thing so many people wanted to do. Go all in on offense. They made a concession at linebacker. And I think part of that leans into what we talked about at the opening of this conversation today on this podcast, is that they're going to have a different ideology on defense. And maybe one that doesn't require you to have Tremaine Edmonds roaming the middle of the field, clogging up lanes in zone coverage, and that there's going to be some wrinkles and layers that help them overcome that. But they made a choice to make a concession at linebacker, and they haven't done much about it, right? That when Christian Kirksey to the practice squad a couple of weeks before the season starts, I mean, that's your big move. They made a calculated choice to make a concession here. Time will tell if they made the right choice, but if you wanted them to put their resources into the offense, they did it. They did it. Next one here comes from Matthew. Matthew says, the Bills started to become elite in 2000. If you were to rank the last 4 years of Bills' initial 53-man rosters, how would you rank them? Mine would be in order 2021, 2023, 2022, and 2020. Just curious, and also what games are you attending this year? All right, so let me address that part of it. What games am I attending this year? I've had this question a lot, and last year I made it out to several games. I think I did LA, Kansas City. I did a home game, the Packers game at home. I don't know my plans for this year, and a lot of that stems from what I'm going to share in the next segment where I go over my in-season programming. But I've not been able to commit to anything because I have some content and job responsibilities that it's going to make attending games difficult this year. So I'm not committing to anything at this point. Maybe that'll change, but I'm not sure. As for me ranking the Bills rosters over the last 3 years, I've said repeatedly on this podcast that one of the worst narratives that exists with the Bills has been this idea, and it started back in 2020. That was the best roster. That's the best talent Josh Allen's ever going to have around him, and the Bills blew it. Wasn't true in 2020. Wasn't true in 2021. Wasn't true in 2022. And I don't think it's true again this year. I think you can rank them in order of how the years have gone chronologically in reverse order. I think this is the best roster they've had. I think last year was the second best roster. I think 2021 was the third best, and 2020 was the fourth best. I think this team has gotten objectively better on paper entering the season year over year. And I know Brandon Beane hasn't made a lot of good second-round picks, but he's made some really friggin' good rosters. And he's done a very good job of pulling all the right levers to create the flexibility that he needs to improve the roster year over year. And I think this is his best roster yet. Just like I said last year and the year before that and the year before that. Next one here comes from Justin. Justin says Mitch Morse seems to be a cap casualty candidate almost every year. With Josh Allen's contract kicking in and needing to get every dollar we can, do you see a scenario where Osiris Torrence locks down the guard spot and the team is comfortable with Bates as a starting center after this season? That could possibly free up a chunk of money for maybe a Gabe Davis extension. Interested to hear your thoughts. Yeah, there's been this yearly conversation about the Bills releasing Mitch Morse, and I've never thought it was a good idea. I mean, Mitch Morse is a high-quality center, captain 2 years in a row for this team, good rapport with Josh Allen. I think the team really likes Mitch Morse. I can tell you that they really like Mitch Morse, and so I don't really find myself believing that the Bills are going to move on from Mitch Morse. But if they do, after the season, they could release him. This is the second to last year of his contract, so 2024 is his final season under contract with the Bills as it stands right now. If the Bills do release him after the season, the Bills will create $8.5 million in cap space, but they'll also create $3 million in dead cap. So they can free up about $5.5 million. But I don't know that they're going to be eager to do that. I think that there is a belief in Ryan Bates that he can be the starting center, and maybe that is the plan. But I think a lot of this is tied to not only the cap money that you can free up by cutting the player, but generally speaking, I think people are still associate Mitch Morse with concussions and vulnerability for availability. Well, he's been very durable for the Buffalo Bills, but concussions are always going to be part of his conversation. And he said openly that he's not really concerned about it. And the next concussion, he'll be fine. And the one after that, like, he's definitely got his own opinions on it. And what he said openly has been that he's not concerned about it, but everybody wants to be concerned for him. It's a very interesting dynamic. Now he's aging, right? I mean, there is some cap implications. They do have Ryan Bates. I understand all of that, but I think the team really likes Mitch Morse, and I'm not going to predict that he's part of the axing of players next offseason. Could I be wrong? Yes, but I know this team really likes Mitch Morse. All right, folks, we got a couple more to get to, and of course, I want to discuss my in-season programming content plan here in just a moment. But first, I need to tell you about FanDuel. Get ready for the NFL season with incredible offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Plus, check this out. This is a crazy good deal. All customers who bet $5, not only do you get $200 in bonus bets, but you get $100 off Sunday ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. And, you know, if you're out of town, you're out of market Bills fan, you got to watch all the Bills games. You have to have Sunday ticket. And if you're in town, you probably want to have the ability to watch whatever game you want. So you got to have Sunday ticket. If you're an NFL fan, you got to have Sunday ticket. You get $100 off if you bet $5 over at FanDuel. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use. You can bet on everything from spreads to player props and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockdown and kick off the NFL season with an offer you won't want to miss. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, folks, welcome back. Do want to take this opportunity to remind you about the Locked On Bills subtext community, something we started offering several months ago, and it has been incredible. Have really enjoyed it, especially since the season has ramped up and we've been talking Bills football on their preseason training camp, sharing my thoughts all the time. So what is the Locked On Bills subtext community? Well, it's an opportunity to have one-on-one text conversations with me. I'll be only a text message away. We can talk Bills football. I send out regular text messages about the podcast, different ideas that I have for the team. We send out in-game texts, a lot of fun stuff there. So check it out. There's a link to join in today's show notes. So if you're on YouTube, wherever you're listening to this podcast, you can find a link to join the Locked On Bills subtext community. Everybody gets 2 weeks free, so check it out. It's going to be fun during the season. You'll stay on top of everything that's going on. I mean, throughout the the cuts in the practice squad and all of that. I mean, it was moving fast and we had a good time. So check it out. Would love for you to join the Locked On Bills subtext community. Again, a link in today's show notes to join. All right, next one here comes from Bills WZA. And the question is, do you take any interest in watching Jessie Pegula in the U.S. Open? And are you like me that you believe if she wins the tournament, that increases the Bills' chances of winning the Super Bowl this year? I'm kidding, but slightly not kidding, as I am superstitious. I find myself hoping that she does well. I'm certainly not rooting against her. But something that has just happened to me throughout the years is my interest in anything that's not football has really diminished. There was a point in my life where I was a huge New York Mets fan. I'd probably watch 150 out of 162 Mets games every year. I had season tickets to the Charlotte Bobcats. Now they're the Hornets, but I had season tickets for like 5 years. I would be interested in anything that's going on with sports. I would not too much into the Sabres. I live in Charlotte and I want the Sabres to do well, but there's just no passion for hockey where I live. And I don't like hockey enough as a game to like stay dialed in when it's not popular in my community, if that makes sense. I hope the Sabres do well. I really, really do. But as I've gotten older, as I've made football my career, I got a daughter, a wife. If it's not football, it just doesn't move the needle for me. I might watch a little golf from time to time. Like if there's a major tournament, I might put that on, but it's pretty much football. And that's it for me in terms of my bandwidth and my brain for what I can keep up with and give my passion to. So I'm hoping that she does well, but I very, very loosely keep up with anything that's not football. And of course, if it's football, I keep up with every little imaginable detail. So hope she does well. I don't know if it means anything for the Bills' success this year, but go Jessie Pegula and go Bills. All right, let's talk about the in-season programming that you can expect. Very excited for this. If you're part of the Locked On Bills subtext community, you already know what's going to happen. We talked about this a couple months ago. I asked for some feedback on there, and this is kind of where the feedback landed, and it also was what I wanted to do. So I was pretty excited to see there being alignment with my vision for the content during the season and what people were wanting. So in season on Locked On Bills, this is my plan. On a normal week, and I know that that's a little bit of a tough thing to say because the Bills have Thursday games, they have Monday games, they have a Saturday game, but I've got it all mapped out. So this is what a normal week is going to look like on this podcast. The Bills will play a game, okay? And whatever day that is, they're going to play a game, and after the game, I'm going to give you a post-game reaction podcast that will be a lot like what we've done in the past. Things I like, things I didn't like. We'll have a big picture discussion, all of that. So after the game, within a few hours, you're going to get my post-game podcast. The next day, you're going to get Herd Mentality. And so Herd Mentality, as you know, is when you submit questions and I answer them on the podcast. And subtext, you guys always get priority when it comes to Herd Mentality. So if you have questions that you'd like addressed on Herd Mentality, just send me a text, designate it as a Herd Mentality question, and I'll get to it. Otherwise, you could send me a DM on Twitter. My handle is @thejoemarino. You can also send me an email, joemarino65@gmail.com. Those are the best ways to submit a Herd Mentality item, but the best way is subtext. Then I'm going to give you an all 22 review. So we did that during the preseason, and so I'm going to study the tape, and I could attack it a number of different ways. If a player really stood out, I'll get into the why, good or bad, right? Stood out, good or bad. What happened, good or bad? I'm going to break that down. Maybe there's narratives. Pass protection was bad. They couldn't cover. Run defense was suspect. Pass rush was really good. Whatever it is, I'm going to get into the why and just explain that to you. Sometimes it could just be a lot of random impressions from studying the tape. But the bottom line is it's going to be an all 22 review where I reflect on the most meaningful things that stood out to me when studying the tape. All right. Then from there, we're going to have Crossover Thursday. That's always been a staple here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where I am going to have a conversation with the host of the team that the Bills are playing. So on Thursday this week, I'm going to speak with John Buechele, host of Locked On Jets. We're going to have a collaborative conversation about the game. Then we're going to do the comprehensive primer. This has been a staple of what we've done throughout the years, where I really get into the weeds with the Bills' opponent, break them down from every angle, talk about my keys to success. And then we're also going to give you a 6th episode every week. where I give you the final thoughts, where the opening segment is just me. All right, the Bills are getting ready to play this game. What's the burning stuff on my mind? Injuries with Dr. Kyle Trimble of Banged Up Bills, and of course my predictions for the game in the final segment. So we're going 6 episodes in between every game, and there's going to be a lot here, but I've really wanted to get that all 22 review incorporated into our weekly programming. It's probably going to drop either Tuesday nights or Wednesday, and that really depends on when the all 22 film becomes available. Sometimes it's available on Monday. A lot of times it's not available until Tuesday morning. And so I'm a little bit at the mercy of that to be able to have it, watch it, and develop the show. So again, I know that there's different days of the week where the Bills will play, but you can be assured that those 6 things are going to happen in between games. A post-game reaction, herd mentality, all 22 review, crossover discussion, the comprehensive primer, and then, of course, final thoughts, injuries, and predictions. And so there might be, on occasion, if the Bills play on a Thursday, where we have 2 episodes on a day. So the bottom line is make sure that you're subscribed if you watch on YouTube or wherever, Spotify, Apple. Just make sure you're subscribed so that you're aware of when content drops. So that's what you can expect from me on Locked On Bills. Now, there's going to be more content. I'm back on WGR every single Wednesday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern time. So you can listen to WGR if you're local, obviously, on 5:50 a.m., but also the Odyssey app. So wherever you are, you can download the Odyssey app and listen to WGR. I'm going to be on there every Wednesday morning with Jeremy White and Joe DiBiase, Wednesdays, 8 a.m. Eastern time. And then also Bleacher Report. I'll be on Bleacher Report a lot immediately after the games. Like within a few minutes of the game being over, I'm going live to Bleacher Report to share my initial thoughts on the game. And I love that because there's a chat function. You guys can get in there and interact and discuss the game and give me thoughts as well. So we'll be doing that for 20 to 30 minutes after every Bills game. And then also there's going to be some midweek streams over at Bleacher Report. And so they're not every week, but regularly, probably most weeks, there'll be a midweek stream. And I'll always do my best to alert you of when those will be on this podcast or through the subtext, but also just if you download the Bleacher Report app, you can follow me on there and that'll alert you whenever I go live as well. So a lot of content coming this fall during the season. I'm very grateful for all these opportunities. And obviously it's been a big transition for me. I know a lot of you guys are aware of this, but my full-time job used to be working for the draftnetwork.com. I resigned from that back in March, and it has really kind of opened up more availability and more opportunities for me to do more here with Bills content. And so I'm going to use that time to add a 6th episode. And I don't know if you guys have noticed this or not, but we've been doing 6 episodes pretty much for the last month or so. So we're already in that rhythm. So that's going to continue, but also what I'm doing with Bleacher Report as well. So thanks for all the support. Can't wait for this season. It's going to be our most comprehensive year yet in terms of the conversations we're going to have, not only on this podcast, but throughout the other avenues that I'm going to be able to share content. Of course, also Bills Digest. I'm going to be writing for Bills Digest. I was part of the season kickoff. There's going to be a mid-season review, a lot of off-season stuff. And so that's another place where you can find my Bills analysis. But a lot of it is coming your way. I am fired up for the season. Can't wait to discuss this football team. I'm really hoping for a great year, obviously. And really thankful for you guys coming along for the ride. So make sure that you are subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills. And I look forward to catching up with you again tomorrow.